So last year I was at the Toronto Indie Author Conference, which is coming up this year. It's something I'm supposed to be promoting a lot more as the community engagement coordinator, and I've let all of that slip, like a lot of things, while I was focused on getting things into the direct market. But here's my pitch to you. If you're in Toronto, go to the Toronto Indie Authors Conference. I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday, and we can chat. I'm one of like 2 people who do comics there. But if you want to talk writing and meet some really interesting writers and really learn about the craft of indie publishing, it's a great place to be. So one of the things that came up last year is there was an attendee, and we were talking about how to get your name out there. And one of these attendees was talking about being on podcasts. And they said, I was on a podcast and it only got 2 to 3 views, and that wasn't worth it. And on the face of it, sure, yeah, that makes sense. If you're only getting 2 to 3 views, why are you wasting your time? And if you're looking at it as a fully just, I am there to sell books, my ROI on being on this podcast is strictly, I must be on podcast and sell X books. Yeah, that's not a great outcome. However, I look at it completely differently. I've been on a whole bunch of podcasts, especially recently, and I have a lot more planned in the future. I'm scheduling some, I'm working it out with others, but the whole point is I'm trying to be as ubiquitous as possible. I bought this silly hat so you could really notice who I am when I'm out there. I've been on podcasts and stuff for years now, and trying to be anywhere people will have me. But the hat might be new, but my look has been pretty consistent for a really long time, as the hat, glasses, beard, that's me. And you can find me on all kinds of podcasts over the years, but I've really been doing a push to just do more. And why am I doing that? Again, it's not just to be on a podcast that has X amount of listeners, although, the bigger the better, of course. It's great to be on a podcast that draws in a ton of people. But the main thing is I just want people to get to know me. And really what I'm doing is, rather than just hoping that people have found me like you guys have and you guys are listening or watching now, I also am using the trust of these hosts, the trust of these shows to say, hey, this guy's one of us. You should check what they're doing out. And again, it's maybe 5, 6, a dozen people at a time with some of these podcasts. And I'm totally fine with that. It's the whole idea of the small room, right? And it's something that I've actually experienced in life. I've hosted panels and workshops and things where, yeah, the room has a dozen people in it. But you know what? A dozen people? It's a lot of people. You try and get them in a small room and suddenly you got a full room on your hands. 50 people? My goodness. You don't know what to do with that amount of people. So it doesn't feel like a lot online, especially when you're looking at some of these influencers that get hundreds and thousands, even on Substack. I'm well over 3,000 followers. So having a dozen doesn't feel like a lot. You guys are my friends. You've been here for a while. You know my cadence. You know what I'm going to talk about each week to a degree. You know my views on things because you've been here. People who listen to the True North Country Comics podcast or the Indie Comics Empire or Two Geeks Talking, which I was just on. If I'm on any of these shows, you don't necessarily know who I am. But the whole idea is, if you aren't familiar with me, this is how you get familiar with me. And I'm willing to do that a few people at a time. And I think that's something that people who just look at the numbers, who are just like, oh, you only get so many viewers, I'm not going to be there. I think that's what people are missing out on. Frankly, that's something we're struggling with the Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast. I've enjoyed doing it. Everyone who's been on there has really enjoyed the exercise. And they've come with the right attitude. Because I tell them, I go, look, we get a dozen viewers. On our best shows, we get maybe a couple dozen viewers. We are not here to just get your name out there. We're here to have some fun, to get to know you. People who want to get that deep dive, who want to listen to 2 hours of us talking about whatever comes to our minds while Roberto draws a really cool page. That's what we're here for. We're really here to go through the process and do the art and show people what it's like to kind of how these comic ideas come together and how everybody's a little different in doing so. So that's the whole concept. And I understand that not everyone has the patience to listen or watch that throughout. So part of going live has actually been that people can drop in and drop out. People can just check out the page whenever they feel comfortable with it. So I think that's really cool. And even with this newsletter, the big thing I noticed was I started recording it and I started just freeform talking. I have my bullet points to keep myself kind of on point, but really I just say, I'm going to talk about these 3 things and I just go. And even when I was writing it, I was doing a form of that because I was using dictation to write it. But then I thought, well, I'm already doing dictation and I'm not that afraid of my voice. So let's just record it. I'll record the dictation and I'll use that to create the post each week. And then that has now gone to video, which is just me, a talking head, talking into my microphone. And it's a platform we didn't necessarily have before. And it's the best way to get to know creators without having to go to a convention and go to a panel. Because without these platforms and without sharing how people got to where they are and sharing all these cool stories and really just being able to really dig into it, not like a fluff piece that's on, regular media that you get 3 minutes to make your point and sell your product and get out. But you have an hour and you can chat about whatever. You can really tell people what you're about and dig into your past and to your process and to all that stuff. And I have a short that may have come out already or is coming out very soon, where I talk about one of the books that inspired me. And that was Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez. And it was effectively a journal. It was him coming up through the ranks as a independent. And that got me through film school, but that also got me to what Pesto Comics is today. I felt like I could do it because he showed the path. He said, hey, I just picked it up and I figured it out. I made it happen. And yes, he has a bunch of advantages in the sense of, contacts in Mexico that he was able to put together the film cheap and all that stuff that I didn't necessarily have. But the whole idea was he did it through force of will. He found the way to do it. And fortunately for me with comics, crowdfunding became a thing, and that became my Mexico. That became my way to put a comic together and get it funded and, not make it fully just a cost on my end and make sure it gets into readers' hands, right? So it's that idea. And back to the point of podcasts, I wouldn't be doing this at all. I would still feel like there's a world that I will never understand how to get into, right? I would have thought there's a world that is just beyond me. I'm not one of them, therefore I will never get to do it myself. And, I would go to panels and everybody asks, how do you break in? And the answer is always the same. The way I broke in won't be the way you broke in. And that remains true. And I have the same answer. It's like, yeah, I had a very particular set of circumstances that I don't think you could replicate. Even just the timing of how everything worked out was very lucky on my end. I got very lucky with my timing. And that luck took a while to hit, right? And that's just the truth of it. So getting to hear these stories, though, and being able to mesh them all together and get their own, it kind of also helped me prepare for the day when the luck came. So is there value to podcasts even if there's only a dozen listeners? Yes, absolutely, because you don't know who you're going to inspire. You don't know who you're actually talking to. You don't know who's going to become a fan for life based on that podcast that only had 6 listeners. So if you're creative and you're trying to get out there and you're trying to just become a face in the crowd, one of the best ways to do it, go on podcasts. It's free. The only thing it costs is your time. You'll meet some really friendly people, some really cool people who will also be quick to push your book, not just on the podcast that you're on, but everywhere, right? You're making contacts, you're making friends, and you're building a community. And that's what's important. The community is what's important, regardless of how big it is. So if you get an invite to a podcast and there's 2 listeners, do it anyway. Look at any of the ones you're a fan of and ask. I highly recommend it. And I highly recommend you check out what I've recently been on. I'm going to leave the links on the actual newsletter portion of this or in the show notes if you're watching the video or listening to the audio. I'll make sure to give you links so that you can check out all the stuff I was recently on. But to quickly list them, I was on Two Geeks Talking. I was on Indie Comic Empire. I was on the True North Country Comics podcast. I was also on Comic Industry Insiders Live. I also did an interview on Comic Industry Insiders, not the live version, the Thursday version. So that should be posted soon. I'll be on the Fortress of Comic News soon. I did reach out to the Bearded Comic Bro to be on that show soon. I'll be back on the Graphic Novel Apostle, which I had a lot of fun with. We're trying to time that closer to Backlot Babylon because there's a book that we're going to review that ties really well into Backlot Babylon. So trying to get all that sorted out and do that at the same time. But the point is, I'm going to be around. That's the point. You'll see this face on other podcasts. And this is the whole reason that I'm doing this. I appreciate you listening or watching or reading every week, but I want there to be more of you. I want to make this community and crowd as big as possible. And the only way to do that is to talk to strangers, 1, 2, a dozen at a time. So I'm happy to do it, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So we'll talk again next week. Hopefully it's more than a dozen of you, but I appreciate you being here regardless of how many there are. And I want to thank you. Have a good one. Talk to you next time.